Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the third episode of Indie Spotlight. Tonight we are joined by Shannon, aka Woochu. Am I saying that right?
Yep, that'll do.
And you are from, or you founded, Terminal Button Games?
Yes, effectively, that's me, I guess. So,
yeah.
It's kind of an alias to go along with Woochu. So let's say Woochu is Terminal Button's only employee. How about that?
Right, okay. So one-man band.
Yeah, one-man noise.
Yeah. And your latest release, if I'm not mistaken, is, once I bring it up, Spiralogon. Spiralagoon?
Yep, I'm good with tricky to say things. I call it Spiralogon.
Spiralogon.
Along the lines, yeah. So like octagons and pentagons and things like that. But
gotcha.
Nice.
The game's all about spirals. So
yeah, that's evident from the trailer. It's great. It's very cool.
Great.
And so this was released. So this was released on Steam in October last year. But did it exist on itch or anything like that?
Yeah,
beforehand?
I think nearly a year before that on itch.
Okay.
I started work on it, I think, around mid to late 2017. So after around 9 months or something, I think it was up on itch. And yeah, about a year later on Steam.
Nice. And are you still actively developing for it or patching it? Is it just one and done? Pretty happy with it?
It's back burner at the moment. I could do more. I've got to be honest, there's not much demand for more. So I think a Linux version is probably the next and potentially only other thing I'll do. Unfortunately, one of the plugins I'm using in Unreal doesn't support Unreal's cross-compilation to Linux, so I have to manually bake down a good many of my textures. And just going to be tedious, but I think once that's done, it should roll.
Yeah. And so you're self-taught?
Yeah.
Pretty much in every aspect?
Yeah, pretty much. I did start with 3D Studio Max back in college, as I'd probably sort of moderately limited introduction to it. But everything since then, just winging it, tutorials, things like that.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so how long was this in development for? How long were you working on this?
Spiralogon, I think around 9 months or so.
Okay, yep. Because it looks fairly polished. I mean, for someone that's learnt everything yourself and...
Well, thanks.
9 months, that's...
Well, I didn't sort of learn everything. So I started with 3D Max at college. That was back in 2001. So I've been using Max for quite a few years. So I've got a decent handle on 3D stuff.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Had an interest in audio for a while. The quality of it is somewhat irrelevant, but I knew how to make it. So I did.
Nice. And this is the first major project that you've released?
In terms of a game, yes, that's the first and only, but the Longford track for R Factor 2 or R Factor 1 initially, so that one I started in 2009, so that's been sort of ongoing since then. So I've built up my 3D skills pretty much with that project. So any sort of polish you might sense in Spiralogon has all sort of come from that. But the funny thing is I sort of got so tired of trying to make things realistic for a simulation, so I kind of went a bit more abstract, I guess, with Spiralogon's visuals. So that was a nice change.
Yeah,
no constraints. You can just go for it and do whatever you like. Yeah.
So what was the motivation behind the, I'm going to say Longford, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's Longford. It.
I'm Tasmanian, I know these things. What was the motivation behind that? Was it a general interest in the history of racing in Tasmania, just a general love of sims or racing sims?
A couple of things. So I'd been playing R Factor 1 for a few years, and that's designed as a moddable platform, so people can develop their own tracks and cars for that and release them to the public. And so after a couple of years of me finding like just great additional community content like on a weekly basis for a couple of years, I thought I want to sort of make something for other people to enjoy at this point. I felt like I'd taken so much, so I thought I might try and give something back. And
Nice.
it actually took me a while to get to learning how to make tracks as well. So I had a couple
How complicated a process is it?
Once you sort of know how it goes, as with many things, I guess it becomes quite clear and simple. But it was just a bit of a learning curve to it. No pun intended, I guess. But I started with a couple of fictional tracks, and I sort of got to a fairly early point where I sort of hit my sort of self-taught limits. So Longford actually benefited greatly from a program by, I think, a Sydney-based developer called Bob's Track Builder, and that made things, let's say, more intuitive, I guess, to someone who had some sort of grip on 3D but wasn't fully into the nuts and bolts of 3D Studio Max or how to get things working in the game engine. So
Do you have to tie it, like, the 3D to the physics in that sense of the game?
I wouldn't really say so. The interaction between the model and the physics engine is mostly just through one text file, which contains a few sort of basic surface properties that you can modify, so for tarmac or grass and things like that.
Nice.
So just assign the right material names, and then the sort of game takes all the physics and does its thing. So that was also really handy. Didn't have to do any sort of proper coding or anything for it either, so that was quite suitable for me.
Yeah, that's a great way to get into making a game easy to mod, having it simple like that.
I tell you what, the amount of times I've heard or even just thought of people saying, "Oh, how do I get into the games industry?" Modding, I can't think of, like, sure, you could go to a specialty school or something, but modding is, well, it's worked for me, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people get into it via mods.
Yeah.
I play a lot of Project Cars.
Oh, yeah.
Because I joined their sort of community assisted part. Right. And a lot of those guys started from modding things, like the SMS themselves started out modding games. So.
Yeah, indeed. There's a whole sort of very connected simulator engine situation. A bit less so these days, but back 5-10 years ago, a lot of stuff was quite common between the platforms.
Yeah.
And modding does seem to be a fairly common or reoccurring theme in the people that we've spoken to so far.
Right. A
lot of them got their start in just modding. And a lot of those skills and things like that were very transferable to, full on creating their own games that they wanted to make.
Yeah, and with modding, you only sort of have to learn sort of one thing at a time as well.
And there's good access to engines now too, isn't there? There's a lot of platforms you can build on.
Crazy, yeah.
And so you used Unreal for...
I did. I thought, graphics, I'm going to get me some of that.
Yeah.
Like the royalty system works out just fine for me because I effectively make no money, so no problems.
Because that's free to use now, isn't it? The Unreal...
It's become such a non-issue for me that I'm not aware if they've changed it in the last year. But last time I checked, it was 5% if you make more than something like $3,000 in a quarter.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So once you get to a certain point, they'll come looking for their cut. Yeah.
And it's not even a big cut, so.
No, that's pretty low, really, for a whole, considering what they're giving you and the capabilities of the engine.
Yeah.
Thinking about making something else, sort of abstract, or what are your plans now?
I feel like if I was to make another game, I'd kind of feel a bit of, like, with Spiralogon, I didn't do any sort of market research. I didn't try and target this or that. I just sort of yeah, it was kind of a personal rebellion against simulation, I suppose. And so, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a wild beast, a mashup of a few different things. But if I were to make something, it'd be nice if I could do something educational, which probably wouldn't make me much money. If I tried to do something purely entertainment based, I'd probably have to focus on making it something that could make me money. And I'm not entirely sure I've got the skills for that. So
it's more of a labour of love than anything at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that's it's funny you mentioned educational, because again, in speaking to other people during recording these series, there seems to be a big push from indie devs into the educational space. No one's really kind of pinpointed an underlying reason. It's just that seems to be what interests them at the moment. Is that the same for you? It's just do you see that that's the way that the market is trending towards, and you see success there? Or
I've got no conception of that whatsoever. For me, I think about how when I was a kid, I was pretty dumb. So
right,
and I couldn't see anything wrong with the world having more information and knowledge about where they've been. So like a history education thing would interest me. Obviously, my limited experience, I'd need to work with other people who really knew their thing if it was going to be an educational thing. But so maybe there's no place for me in it whatsoever. I should leave it to the experts.
No, but you want someone who's passionate about creating something entertaining and educational at the same time. You don't want just dry information. It's got to be engaging. Well, growing up playing something like Carmen Sandiego, forcing me to learn things. I had to pull out the old World Book encyclopedias off the shelf and look up maps. Like, this was before the internet was really a thing, so there's definitely a space for it.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in if it was some sort of educational game or just any sort of game, if it had a sort of reliance on outside sources, such as an encyclopedia, or you might use the internet these days to look up where whatever city is or who did what in what year or something. I don't know.
Teaching kids how to find information is actually a great skill that I think needs to be taught more. And that what you've just said is key. Like, it shouldn't just be Google it, it's the first answer. No, you actually need to be able to check. Or do you have an inkling if that's right or not? Don't just trust the internet. That'd be a great idea.
Yeah, I'd be screwed because I trust the internet. 110%. No, I lie. I spend most of my time on Reddit, and that's just a cesspool. So what games did you play as a kid then? What kind of games shaped, I guess, whether they had an effect on your current release or not? What kind of games did you play and enjoy the most?
All right, I'll try not to get sidetracked here.
Seriously, that's our tagline.
We don't mind a sidetrack. Right. Tangents a go-go.
I'll tangent, but I also want to do like the full circle and get back to the actual answer. I guess we've really just done it right now. There we go. So when I was a kid, my dad was able to borrow a computer from where he was teaching. So got to play a few games on BBC Micro.
Hey, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm with you there.
Right. So there were... I mainly just, I think, played a few platformer games. Actually, there was one called Dinosaur Discovery, which I think may sort of give me some basis in wanting to refer to outside things to complete a game task or something. I think they had some maps and a few things like that, although, may have been built into the game. Anyway, irrelevant. Not relevant. Relevant. Never mind.
Relevant to the tangent.
Yeah. So I also had a go of an old game called Revs, which was something like a Formula 3 car racing game based around Silverstone, and that was at an age where I didn't really understand driving or what Silverstone was, or I'm not even 100% sure it was Silverstone. But anyway, I sucked at it, but it was a racing game, and played a few more similar racing games. We ended up getting a 486, I think, at one point. So there's a few more racing games there. Got a few from friends as well.
See, this is where I jump on board. I'm not
Right,
old.
okay.
I'm not. I don't like to assume anyone's age, but Dave is older than me, so he.
Okie doke.
Yeah.
Let's say I played some Lemmings on 486.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
It's not really platformer, but there's stuff like that in there. Alex Kidd on Sega Master System I played a bit of, so that's proper platforming, I guess, and Sonic 2. Well, maybe there's a part of Spiralogon which is basically going uncontrollably fast, so I don't know if that fed into that. But also the sort of racing games as well. So the first of the Jeff Crammond
Oh yes,
Formula
F1 GP.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
good
then
times.
through GP2 as well, and 3 and 4. But also in it's 96, I think I must have got a copy of Quake. I think it came with a cereal box, whether it's Nutri-Grain or something.
Nice.
So so that sort of got me into first-person shooters a bit. But then eventually I got Half-Life as well, and the sort of additional story aspect to that sort of put me off, like, just flat-out shooters from that point. So Half-Life modding I started to take a look at.
Yes. Yep.
I did a couple of I did a deathmatch test level and tried a Team Fortress test level as well.
Nice.
Team Fortress Classic at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
But also Grand Prix 2, which I mentioned. I actually started doing some minor modding on that, so there'd been some. So that wasn't a moddable game, but community and the internet, hooray, had made some tools to, I don't know, hack the Exie or something like that. And so we could, if you were talented enough, I guess you could make new tracks, but my sort of track making was limited to maybe moving a fence a little bit or changing a sponsor sign or something like that. But I guess that was where I started the road to Longford, I guess. But yeah, it would have been over 10 years before I actually started Longford. So yeah, a bit of racing games, a bit of first-person shooter, mainly in the form of the Half-Life franchise, and Team Fortress Classic and 2.
Have you played Alex, the new Half-Life game?
I haven't, no. I'm kind of waiting for that to not be a VR title. Has
Yeah,
that happened
okay. I know that.
Because I will.
I think it may have happened. I don't know how good it is, but
right.
Yeah, it's not officially worked on, but people are working on it.
yeah, there was certainly demand for it. That's for sure. Because
Yeah,
they
I demand
obviously
it.
have.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, look,
Yeah.
to be honest, I mean, I have VR, but I don't know. I'd almost rather just play a Half-Life game first person.
Right, yeah. How far did I get through my... Yeah. Okay, well, I was lent a Oculus Rift sort of late in the Spiralogon development phase, I think. And I can tell you, to see the characters and the worlds and things like that I'd actually made, and then to see them in virtual reality, that was a whole new experience. I tried it with Longford as well, and again, that was incredible. So see lots of people comment about the sense of presence in virtual reality, but I can tell you it's a bit different as well when you've actually made the world that you're present in virtual reality. That's a bit of a trip.
I imagine so. Yeah, I mean, I've tried Josh's VR, but to actually be in something you've made yourself would be
Yeah.
Heck of an experience.
Yeah, not something I'd started developing with VR as well. I suppose that would be a different experience again to start from scratch with VR, but to have had something for, say, 7, 8, 9 years that's just been 2D on a screen. Although that's half a lie. Shout out to the university in Launceston in the HitLab program they had when I was there. I mentioned to my friend James, who was on the staff, that I had a simulation of Longford, and it'd be fun to try it on their big 3-projector 3D setup.
Oh, nice.
I think he thought, yeah, okay, whatever, sure. But once he had a look at it, he was suitably impressed, I think. And I think they ended up using that for a demo in there a few times. But we had a 3D setup with that, but I'm not sure that it worked on R-Factor 1 as it was at the time. But it was 3 giant screens, so that was another sort of brand new thing out of nowhere compared to one, say, 24-inch screen or something. Yeah. Fortunately, it didn't seem like I was a motion-sick person. Spiralogon, if a game was going to give you motion sickness, that might be it. Racing sims, that was fine for me as well. Back to Half-Life modding for a sec. I'm reminded that a friend of mine and I, we drew up some very tentative plans for making a Half-Life mod called Nightlife, and it was basically going to be walking around outside pubs in the middle of the night with like boozy vision and things like that. It was going to be fun, but once again limited by ignorance, I suppose. But also remembered, back to what inspired me to work on Longford. Having sort of had a couple of failed attempts at just sort of making any sort of fictional track, just the whole process of getting it into the game. Or getting it further than just getting it into the game. My mum mentioned that they used to have races in Longford back in the 60s. She didn't go there herself, but so I thought, okay, it's just going to be, I don't know, Holden's driving around or something like that. And at that time I had a decent understanding of, say, Formula One history of the period. Used to spend a little bit of time in libraries looking at motorsport books, and as it happened, more or less the only motorsport books in there were from, say, the 50s, 60s, 70s or something like that. So that was the sort of way of educating myself about that. But to find out that the greatest Formula One drivers of their time, and a fair few of them the greatest Formula One drivers ever, are actually doodling around in Longford. In rural Tasmania.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Australian Grand Prix, basically.
It was a couple of years. Although not on the World Championship calendar, it literally was the Australian Grand Prix.
And then just the Tasman series a bit later on, wasn't it, I think?
So I think 59 and 65 for the Australian Grand Prix, and I think the Tasman series started in 64, so in 65 it was sort of like a double for that. But yeah, like the greatest drivers, like unbelievable.
Brabham.
Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, although at that point he wasn't a world champion, just coming up.
Derek Bell?
Wow, I'm not sure about that one.
There were certainly some big names though, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Because they had the revival a few years ago where they did the mile. The flying mile, they called it. So it was cool that they could celebrate that.
I was exhibiting Longford, my project, at that. So Shannon's Insurance.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Shannon's Insurance had a truck that they had a couple of PlayStation rigs and steering wheels set up on. So I was invited along to that. So I carted along a couple of PCs and hooked it up to their kit and had people driving around for a few minutes each. And
that's cool.
Yeah, I was pretty much running flat out all day for those.
That would have been super popular.
Didn't get to see too much of the actual cars, but yeah, to again think that like the Le Mans Porsche prototypes from the 1980s were rolling down back road of Longford. You could see them bouncing almost uncontrollably on the road. I believe.
I'd like to throw a 917 down there would be hilarious.
Yeah, it was a 962 they had there, and
oh wow, even faster.
Yeah, they weren't able to run them flat out. It was just too bumpy for them, and you could see them just going.
Yeah. You'd run out of road fairly quick too, really, at that speed.
Yeah.
It's a long straight, but still.
Yeah.
It's no Mulsanne. But...
No. And of course, those ones would have done the Mulsanne without chicanes as well. So.
Yeah, without the kinks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Also, so it was knowing the history of motorsport and sort of like a little comment from my mum sort of got me researching it, and it was that point I found out who actually drove there, and I thought, wow, this is something real rather than me making up something fictional. And it turns out there's actually a surprising amount of material for it as well, like photos and videos.
Nice.
And I just got really into it. I've actually got a unpublished version still occasionally working on here as well, so maybe sometime in the next few months there'll be a new one of that.
Oh, nice.
So any more mods in your future pertaining to racing sims at all?
Yes. Actually, currently, even earlier today, and a couple of hours ago, I sent out a new build to a guy in Lithuania, I believe. He's working on the physics for a car mod. So we're taking one of the sort of default cars from R Factor 2 and converting it to closely resemble the entire field of Le Mans 1967. So that's the year after the popular Hollywood film of earlier this year, was it? Ford versus Ferrari. So I'm very much into that whole story as well.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. So yes, certainly not an official thing. So we're just fictionalizing things here and there, and it's sort of true modding as well. What you might find with a lot of mods for R Factor and various other games these days, people making high quality stuff from scratch. But I don't have much background in modeling cars or the physics either. So taking what's available, sort of warping it a bit, doing research, looking at photos, things like that, and just trying to make something that's, while it's not perfect, I think a suitable homage or something like that. Also did the same thing, but for 1954 Le Mans as well. So, thoroughly into that as well. Hey, you know what? I've also got a modder project. It's sort of my second track, I guess you might say, is based on Le Mans 1967. So that suits those cars pretty well. So yes, Longford and Le Mans, big things for me.
Nice. Oh, that's your Legrand circuit, is it?
That's it. Yep.
I've seen the YouTube videos.
All right.
Yeah,
yep. Yeah. So there's also an in development version of that somewhere as well.
That's very cool. I'm excited to dive into some of these other games because the ones I've played, predominantly Project Cars, aren't very modding friendly. People have modded them.
Yeah.
But to jump into like Assetto and R Factor 2 where people have made some stuff is going to be great.
Yeah. So much stuff. It's crazy.
And just watching the YouTube of your Longford track, like it looks great. Like,
thank you.
The detail is amazing.
Yep, I went really hard at it, I suppose. I can say a few of the trees there are the actual trees that are at Longford. Took photos of them and worked them up into textures. So, for example, there's
I was going to ask you if you had
tree.
to go on, if you actually travelled to location. Or if it was,
I was at university in Launceston for 6 years, so I was nice and close by, so I went down regularly. And it's the viaduct, the pub, and the mill, the tannery, all these sorts of buildings. Like textured them from photos, so they look pretty similar to the real buildings, things like that.
It's definitely going to have to drive around Longford next time I'm heading up that direction and just take a closer look.
Yep.
And,
Does R Factor have VR, just quickly? You mentioned
It does.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if it's 100% perfectly implemented support at this point, but it does work.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I might have to check it out in VR, Dave, if you want to come and have a look.
I will come round.
Yeah. Save you a real long drive.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to do both at some point.
True.
When I was testing Longford and Le Grand Circuit with VR, I sort of pulled out of the pits and parked on the side of the road and just sort of stood up in the cockpit and watched the other cars drive past. It was just really lovely.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the level of immersion that VR allows, obviously. That's its whole deal, but nothing, and I think I've mentioned this previously on one of our podcasts, but when it comes to VR, nothing felt as immersive for me as Project Cars. Because everything else is still limited by the physical space that you're in. There's different methods being implemented to replace walking and things like that. But when you're in a car, you're other than being thrown from side to side as you put it around corners and things like that. To me, it was just the most immersive experience that I've had so far in VR. Because you literally do sit in a seat, and as long as you've got a steering wheel and VR headset, you're pretty much right to go.
Yeah, with the coronavirus lockdown, what a lot of people are thinking about esports, how may work for various other things, but it works extremely well for car racing because people sitting on a chair with the steering wheel, like doing pretty much the same thing as, obviously, like huge differences, but also extremely similar.
They actually did that with some F1 drivers, didn't they?
There's been a lot of it,
Yeah, and they've had some F1 drivers along with YouTubers, like Jimmy Broadbent was in the races. It was quite funny watching him race and going, he couldn't believe he was in with the F1 drivers.
Yeah, I had that stream up at various points during the Le Mans Virtual.
And the supercars were obviously doing it, like all the drivers were in doing that.
Yeah, it was IndyCar as well. I think NASCAR did some stuff.
Many things.
Yeah, right.
Was it the
Formula
esports
E as well, yeah.
That's the guy who got in trouble because he basically put in a proper esports driver rather than himself.
Yeah, lost his real job.
Yeah.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
He did.
Wow. So, now why is that? Was this...
Because they were taking it seriously.
It was being taken seriously. So,
yes.
It's a virtual championship or there's money involved. My understanding was it was just a form of entertainment while they couldn't actually hold race meets. But
some of the F1 stuff was, but some of the actual different motorsport series were running it fairly seriously.
Yeah,
as instead of the actual real thing,
Yeah, right. Now, anything that you would like to plug at this point before we finish up?
Well, Spiralogon is on sale in the Steam sale, we could say that. If you're in Australia, you can buy it for around 77 cents.
Absolute bargain.
Yes, you should be able to get at least 7 minutes of entertainment out of it, possibly 77. Like, I gotta tell you, I kind of find it difficult to play it because it's sort of designed to put immense pressure on your time management. So it's sort of like it's simple to finish a level, but the goal is to not just finish it, but to collect as much stuff as you can before finishing it. And you don't have to cover too much ground, but if you don't make it in time, then you get nothing. So you want to leave it as late as you can, and then you sort of end up crushing yourself under this time pressure. So you can get out early, but your score's going to suffer. So you leave it as long as you can.
Unforgiving was the common theme that I did find in a couple of reviews, that it was quite full on.
You want to sort of finish a level with like 1 or 2 seconds left, and so I can fail it. Like, I can fail a level a few times, like say miss out by 5 seconds or 3 seconds, but to succeed with 2 or 3 seconds left, I can sort of only do that once before having to take a breather. So
Yeah,
I've sort of built in, like obviously I'm heavily invested in the game, so other people may not care so much as I do, but yeah, I may have made it a little too intense. But yeah, just really...
Easy to play, hard to master, though. You've got the right game dev thing there.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's boring to play and hard to master, and then it sort of falls apart a bit, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Well, you do some sim racing.
I do.
Enjoy that. Then do you do something else and come back to it? Come back to Spiralogon.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's sort of born from, like, trying to do fast with perfection, which comes from sim racing. But yeah, wanting to sort of abstract that whole feeling to doing fast precision with time pressures. So
that's very cool.
Sort of like a cross between car racing and pinball, but with humanoid characters instead of cars or balls.
Nice.
And of course, we will play through your Longford track. And, well, Dave will, because I suck at driving.
Right.
Oh, me too, but I just keep going.
Yeah, you're a lot better than me. So, I keep going, but through walls. But yeah, definitely keen to check that out. And I think, Dave, we might even throw that up on the YouTube as well.
Oh, there'll definitely be some footage of me trying it.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, so we'll put that out there. And yeah, just thanks again for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, anything else that you have in the pipeline in the coming times, just give us a shout out. We're happy to share it with our community and do what we can to help.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And but yeah, other than that, bye for now.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.